They laughed when he walked in, until they realized who he was. The courtroom air was thick with contempt, punctuated by snorts from the back row, where the arresting officers leaned against the wall, arms folded, amused. Their target? A tall, composed black man in a tailored gray suit, hands cuffed, expression unreadable. He walked with the quiet dignity of someone who'd been underestimated all his life. To them, he was just another mouthy suspect who refused to show ID fast enough. To the bailiff, he was case number 4382. To the judge, just a 5-minute nuisance before lunch. The public defender barely looked up from her folder, but as Jamal Briggs stood before them all, absorbing their sneers without flinching, a quiet storm brewed behind his eyes. He wasn't here to plead for mercy. He was here for something bigger. And in less than 20 minutes, the entire courtroom would be on trial. Jamal Briggs didn't look like someone the system could easily swallow. 42 years old, tall, with salt and pepper hair, his every movement was calm, deliberate, almost rehearsed. He didn't fidget, didn't glance around the courtroom looking for sympathy. He sat in silence, hands folded in his lap, eyes steady. Born and raised in Baltimore's West Side, Jamal grew up surrounded by broken windows and louder sirens, a kid who knew how to disappear in plain sight. But he didn't just survive, he rose. Scholarships led him to Howard, then Georgetown Law. He clerked in D.C. for a while, then faded from public records entirely. No social media, no LinkedIn, nothing recent. Just an ordinary name on a docket sheet, now charged with resisting arrest during a routine traffic stop. The young public defender assigned to him, Eliza Nguyen, 27 and 2 years out of law school, sensed something was off the second she met him. He didn't ask questions. He offered no excuses. He even thanked her for her time. His eyes were sharp, scanning the courtroom like someone who'd already been here before, just never in that seat. When she asked what happened, he gave only a wry smile and said, "I was pulled over for being polite in the wrong zip code." Eliza didn't laugh. She watched him quietly, unsettled. This man wasn't afraid. He was watching, waiting, calculating, and something about the way he sat there, patient, composed, unmoved, told her the real story hadn't even started yet. Officer Dean Colby took the stand like a man stepping into a bar fight he already knew he'd win. Mid-40s, stocky, buzz cut, a badge worn more like a trophy than a duty. His smirk stretched just a little too long, his voice just a bit too loud. He leaned into the microphone, describing the traffic stop with a casual arrogance that turned every sentence into a punchline. Claimed the suspect was uncooperative, hostile, and gave attitude. Said Jamal had a chip on his shoulder, acted like he was above the law. Never mind that there was no dash cam footage. Never mind the witness statements were mysteriously missing. Colby waved it off like a magician misdirecting the audience. He chuckled when describing how Jamal needed a reality check and glanced at his buddies in the gallery like he was performing for a crowd. The judge didn't interrupt. The prosecutor didn't blink. The laughter wasn't just tolerated, it was invited. To them, this was routine. Another defendant, another lie, another version of the same old story. But Eliza caught something else, a slight hesitation when Colby was pressed on the timeline. A flicker of uncertainty when asked why the stop escalated. It was buried under confidence, but it was there. And Jamal didn't say a word. He just watched, calm, focused, like a man letting his opponent dig the hole deeper with every smug word. This wasn't Colby's victory lap. It was his setup, and he didn't even see it coming. It happened just past 9 p.m. on a quiet stretch of road near Fairview Boulevard. Jamal had been driving a rental car back to his hotel after a late dinner, still in his suit from earlier meetings. The red and blue lights appeared out of nowhere, flashing behind him like a warning shot. He pulled over calmly, lowered his window, and rested both hands visibly on the steering wheel. When Officer Colby approached, Jamal greeted him with a level voice, already holding his driver's license and rental agreement. Colby didn't take them. Instead, he asked if the car was stolen. Jamal explained again that it was a government rental. That's when Colby asked him to step out. Jamal hesitated, not out of fear, but confusion. When he asked for clarification, Colby's tone shifted. Within moments, another cruiser arrived. They pulled him out, patted him down, and began searching the car without a warrant. Jamal said nothing, just watched as they rifled through papers, slammed compartments, and found nothing. Not a weapon, not a trace of drugs, nothing. Still, they cuffed him, claimed he had been obstructing. As they shoved him into the cruiser, Jamal turned to Colby and said quietly, "You're going to regret this." Colby laughed, thought it was a threat. It wasn't. It was a warning. And back in the courtroom now, that moment returned like a slow echo. Jamal sat expressionless, but Eliza felt it. Something was shifting. This wasn't a man trying to escape trouble. This was someone walking straight into it, eyes wide open, with a plan. When the prosecution rested, the courtroom settled into that familiar lull, the kind that assumes the end is already written. But Jamal slowly stood, requested to speak on his own behalf, and surprised everyone when the judge granted it. He stepped forward with no notes, no lawyer whispering in his ear, just that same calm confidence that made people uncomfortable. He turned to the jury, then to the officers watching from the back row, and began with a question. Not about what happened that night, but about protocol, legal, procedural, specific. His voice was steady, every word crisp. He asked Officer Colby to explain the legal grounds for the search. Colby stumbled. Jamal pressed. What time did backup arrive? Why wasn't a warrant requested? What articulable suspicion existed to justify a full vehicle search? The officer mumbled, suddenly less cocky. Murmurs rippled through the room. Eliza sat frozen, watching this shift unfold. The judge leaned forward, brow furrowed. For the first time, it felt like someone was listening. Jamal wasn't just challenging the narrative. He was dismantling it, brick by brick, using their own words against them. When Colby faltered under cross-questioning, Jamal didn't gloat. He paused, letting the silence speak. Then he turned to the gallery. I've been silent long enough. The room went still. This wasn't about proving innocence anymore. It was about exposing something bigger. Jamal wasn't defending himself. He was laying a trap, and by the time anyone realized it, the floor was already giving way. The jury wasn't just watching a case anymore. They were watching a reckoning. During the recess, Eliza couldn't sit still. She paced the hallway outside the courtroom, heart racing, fingers tapping against her phone screen as she searched everything she could about Jamal Briggs. But it was like trying to chase smoke. No social media, no legal record. Just one odd article from 12 years ago. Jamal Briggs, recent graduate of Georgetown Law, selected for a federal leadership initiative. After that, nothing. Not even a LinkedIn profile. That wasn't just unusual. It was strategic. People like Jamal didn't vanish by accident. They erased themselves on purpose. She stared at the article's grainy headshot. Same eyes, same posture, same quiet fire. Back inside the courtroom, Jamal sat motionless, as if the chaos swirling around him didn't touch him at all. When she returned to their table, she leaned in and whispered, "Who are you really?" Jamal didn't look at her. He just murmured, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." It wasn't an answer. It was a puzzle piece. And suddenly, all the little things, the way he spoke with precision, the way he dissected Colby's testimony, the calm he carried even while handcuffed, they didn't feel like signs of innocence. They felt like evidence of training, not street smarts, strategy. She glanced back at the officers, still smirking, still smug, unaware they were being watched like insects under glass. Something was building. Not tension, momentum. Eliza realized she wasn't defending a man being railroaded. She was sitting beside someone running an operation. And the only question left was what exactly they had all just walked into. The moment the courtroom reconvened after recess, something had shifted. It was subtle, like the first drop in barometric pressure before a storm. Jamal stood again, this time holding a small envelope in his hands. Without speaking, he handed it to Eliza, his eyes meeting hers for a fraction of a second. Calm, unreadable, final. She opened it slowly, the soft rip of paper the only sound in the room. Inside was a laminated ID card with a federal seal and an embossed badge number. Her breath caught. FBI, Assistant Director, Internal Affairs Division. Her eyes darted to him, then to the judge, who was already growing impatient. Jamal stepped forward, voice low but clear. I request the court's attention, Your Honor. The judge leaned back, skeptical. Proceed. Jamal reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew a slim black case, placed it gently on the evidence table, and flipped it open. The badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. For the first time all day, the room fell completely silent. I am Assistant Director Jamal Briggs, here under full authority of the United States Department of Justice, investigating systemic misconduct within local law enforcement. He paused, scanning the room. This courtroom, this department, and this chain of command are part of that investigation. Audible gasps rippled across the gallery. The prosecutor's mouth hung open. The officers shifted in their seats. Colby looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Jamal continued, all proceedings today have been recorded and witnessed by federal observers. A second later, two men in suits stood at the back of the room and raised their credentials. Eliza's head spun. The judge stumbled through a response, but Jamal held up a hand. Respectfully, Your Honor, this court is now under federal review. Colby stood, stammering something about misunderstanding, but agents moved toward him. He didn't move. Couldn't. The power dynamic flipped in an instant. All the smirks were gone, and Jamal, once the laughingstock of that courtroom, was now its reckoning. The silence that followed wasn't just shock. It was the sound of a system breaking open. The next few minutes unfolded like the turning of a tide no one could stop. As federal agents stepped forward, quietly escorting Officer Colby and two others from the courtroom, Jamal remained perfectly still, his badge case still open on the evidence table. The judge tried to regain control, stammering something about due process and chain of jurisdiction. But it was too late. Authority had already shifted. Jamal turned slightly toward the gallery, where every face had transformed. Mockery replaced with dread, confusion, or shame. The murmurs had died. Phones were out now, recording every second. The courtroom no longer a place of ridicule, but a stage for justice. Jamal cleared his throat, speaking not with anger but resolve. Over the past year, our division has received repeated complaints from civilians, defense attorneys, and even former officers about systemic misconduct in this jurisdiction, racial targeting, evidence tampering, abuse of power. He glanced at Eliza, then back to the room. This morning's events were a live field assessment. The results are self-evident. A murmur rolled across the benches like thunder. He gestured to the agents, who handed out sealed folders to the bailiffs, the clerk, even the judge, each containing documentation, transcripts, and sworn testimony. Eliza flipped hers open and saw everything. Reports, patterns, complaints buried or ignored. She looked at Jamal with a new kind of awe. Not fear, not sympathy, but respect. This hadn't been a reaction. It had been a mission, deliberate, measured, precise. Jamal didn't just walk into their courtroom. He built the fuse, lit it, and waited. And now the explosion was unfolding exactly as planned. The smug confidence that once filled the room had drained out completely. Officers in the back fidgeted. The prosecutor looked pale. The judge, for the first time, said nothing. This was no longer about clearing a name. It was about exposing a machine. And Jamal, the man they'd cuffed without cause, had just become the man tearing it all down from the inside out. The footage hit the internet within the hour. A grainy clip from a bystander's phone showed the moment Jamal opened his badge case and announced his identity. It spread like wildfire. By nightfall, national news anchors were replaying the clip on loop, voices tinged with disbelief and awe. Assistant FBI director disguised as defendant in corruption sting. Social media exploded. Hashtags surged. Civil rights leaders praised the move as brilliant and necessary. Local officials scrambled to issue statements, some calling it a setup, others pretending they'd known all along. But no amount of spin could erase the truth. The courtroom that mocked Jamal had become the symbol of its own undoing. Comment sections filled with outrage. Videos of Officer Colby being led away in cuffs were dissected frame by frame. Former defendants from the same precinct began to come forward, sharing eerily similar stories. Cases reopened. Internal affairs lines flooded. Even the mayor, tight-lipped and visibly shaken, was forced to call for an emergency audit. Jamal, meanwhile, refused to appear on television. He gave one brief press statement, standing on the courthouse steps. His words were measured, calm. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. Justice isn't a show. It's a process. And for too long, this one has been broken. Then he stepped aside and let the facts speak for themselves. No theatrics, no victory lap. Just the quiet satisfaction of truth laid bare. The same courtroom that once laughed at him had been transformed into a cautionary tale, and Jamal Briggs, the man they dismissed, had rewritten the ending. In the days that followed, the fallout came fast and without mercy. Officer Colby was officially suspended pending a federal indictment, but whispers from inside the department suggested his badge would never see daylight again. Two other officers linked to his cases resigned under pressure. The judge who had rolled his eyes at Jamal's presence was placed on administrative leave as the state's Judicial Oversight Committee launched a full investigation. The local prosecutor's office was forced to drop over a dozen open cases due to compromised testimony. News trucks camped outside the courthouse, while state officials called for sweeping reforms. Community activists who had once been ignored were suddenly being invited to policy meetings. For the first time in years, the public felt heard. Jamal, though, had already disappeared from the spotlight. No press junket, no book deal, just a quiet return to D.C., where he resumed his work like nothing had happened. But inside his office, a new stack of case files had arrived. Names of other towns, other courtrooms, other forgotten places where justice had lost its way. Eliza, meanwhile, received an offer to join a federal civil rights task force, hand-delivered by one of Jamal's agents. She accepted without hesitation. Back in Fairview, the silence left behind was different now. Not the silence of fear or submission, but the kind that follows a long-awaited reckoning. And while many still whispered, still defended the old ways, a line had been drawn, a mirror had been held up, and no one who looked into it could deny what they saw anymore. The message was clear. Injustice might think it can wear a badge or hold a gavel, but sometimes justice wears a suit, walks in alone, and flips the entire system on its head. 2 weeks later, Jamal stood alone on the steps of an old brick building in D.C., the community law center where he'd first interned as a broke law student, scraping by on coffee and conviction. The paint had chipped, the plaque outside had faded, but the bench near the door was exactly where he remembered it. He sat down, resting a hand on the armrest, looking out over the same intersection he used to cross with worn-out shoes and a head full of purpose. In his coat pocket was a folded letter from one of the Fairview residents, handwritten, barely legible, but full of raw gratitude. "You didn't just walk into that courtroom for yourself," it read. "You walked in for all of us." He held it for a long moment, then placed it gently in the inside pocket of his jacket. His phone buzzed. Another alert, another case, but he ignored it. For the first time in weeks, the silence was welcome, not strategic, not tense, just still. He looked up at the building, the memories flickering like film, his first lost case, his first client who cried, his mentor's voice reminding him, "You don't fight for applause. You fight so someone else doesn't have to." That voice was gone now, lost to time, but its echo had never left him. He stood, brushed the dust from his coat, and exhaled. Not a sigh, a release. He hadn't come to that town for revenge. He'd come to remind it of what justice should feel like. And as he walked away, the streets of D.C. buzzing around him, Jamal Briggs disappeared once again into the rhythm of quiet service. No medals, no speeches, just a man doing the work, still watching, still waiting, still ready. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Jamal didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw punches or demand attention. He listened. He waited. And when the moment came, he used the truth like a blade, silent, sharp, and undeniable. That courtroom wasn't just a place where justice failed. It was a reflection of what happens when people stop looking closely, stop asking questions, stop holding each other accountable. And maybe that's the real warning in Jamal's story. Justice doesn't always arrive with flashing lights and sirens. Sometimes it walks in quietly, dressed like anyone else, and waits for the right moment to speak. We don't need more heroes in capes. We need people who pay attention, people who don't laugh when the system targets the wrong person, people who look twice. So next time you're in the room and someone's being dismissed, silenced, overlooked, ask yourself what you'd do if the roles were reversed. Because maybe that person isn't just a defendant, a stranger, a headline waiting to be forgotten. Maybe they're the reason the truth finally stands up. And when it does, we all rise with it.